It is March 6th, 2025, and EU leaders got together in Brussels to hold an emergency summit, really a war rally for Ukraine, in which you had French President Emmanuel Macron saying all sorts of things, right? Calling Russia a threat, saying that France was considering using its nuclear arsenal to defend its European allies. Yeah, these are statements that are not going to get them anywhere good with Russia anytime soon, but yet they don't seem to care. They only seem to care about rallying around Zelensky, showing him their undying support, and acting as though Europe is capable of carrying Ukraine without the US. It's safe to say that they're all in for a wake up call, and we got into all of the latest with a special guest earlier. But before we get to that, I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you so much to all of you who have sent me donations and books to my post office box. I announced that I had opened a P.O. box 1 week ago today, and I have been overwhelmed with the support. Y'all are so awesome. I genuinely, that those of you who have sent me books that you wrote or books that I've never heard of before, or also in this case, a book that I've really been wanting to read. Shout out to Alan in Texas for this book and for another one that he included in there. I'm looking forward to reading them both, really to exploring all of them and to updating the bookshelf behind me. That is on my list of things to do today. Also, shout out to Stacy in Michigan for sending treats for Jax. He is obsessed with rawhide bones, and these were right up his alley, so much so to the point where he literally finished one in record time, and then he's currently mad at me because I won't give him another one. The struggle is real. And if you want to add to my book collection, or you want to send me direct donations by mail, such as cash or check, that don't include any of the online fees, you are more than welcome to. I'll leave all of the information for my P.O. box below. And now, without further ado, let's take a listen to today's interview. Joining me now to discuss is Glenn Diesson, a geopolitical analyst, professor at the University of South-Eastern Norway, and author of The Ukraine War and the Eurasian World Order, which I actually just got a copy of in the mail, so I'm very much looking forward to reading it. I've seen a lot of talk about it suddenly over on X, so looking forward to it. Professor Diesen, thanks so much for taking the time to join me.
My pleasure, and yeah, thank you for buying the book. So,
Of course. Hey, the topic wise, it's right up my alley, so I'm looking forward to it. And also to getting your insight on the latest here, because as we saw earlier, EU leaders held an emergency summit in Brussels following the emergency summit that was held by European leaders in London on Sunday. And there seems to be a real case of panic over the latest pressure that the Trump administration is putting on Zelensky. So, what do you make of how Europe is responding with this series of war rallies? And they are really showing up with their support for Kiev, at least in terms of what they are saying.
well, it's yeah, they're panicked, but they're not quite sure what to do. So they're trying to throw money at the problem. But again, a lot of this is just pointless because now that the United States is pulling the support, there's not much more that Europeans can do. They don't have enough money, they don't have the weapons, and they also have a problem with the coordination of their efforts. They want different things. Besides the weapons, the US is also cutting its intelligence sharing without American logistics. All of this, the whole thing falls apart very quickly. And what the Europeans also don't seem to be aware that all these efforts of picking up the pieces of the United States and try to fill its shoes, it's worth noting that the United States is cutting this to put pressure on Zelensky, to force him to the negotiation table. The Europeans are very clearly saying they don't want this peace plan of Trump, and the efforts to pump Ukraine with money now is an effort effectively then to sabotage his peace deal. So the Europeans might be making some powerful enemies.
Yeah, and that's been the interesting thing to watch is that I've seen a number of different, reports, articles written on this question of, okay, if Washington pulls back on its support for Kiev, can Europe make up for that support? And while a lot of them will say, yeah, money wise, they can pledge this and pledge that, when it comes to actual tangible weapons that Kiev's forces need right now, that's not something that Europe is able to provide. And then on top of that, if you look at the US, not just pulling back in its support for Kiev, but also pursuing normalization with Russia, what kind of a situation does that put us in? I mean, does Europe pretty much have to go along with what the US is doing to a certain extent?
Yeah, I think they do, and this is because NATO is in large part it is United States, so you can't really pull off NATO without the United States. But it's also, I think, causing a lot of irritation now because keep in mind that Trump's idea to turn his back a little bit on the European, put pressure on them. This is not something that's shared by the entire political class in the United States, but now, of course, when they see the Europeans trying whatever they can to pull America into the war, asking for more assistance, it's starting to look like Europe is becoming a very bad investment. That Trump, Musk, all of these people are very worried that the United States is moving towards bankruptcy, that they have to start saving some money, and Europe is proving to be a very expensive project, and Europe is also quickly losing its relevance in the world. So I think more of the American leadership will get on board on this train. Suggesting that perhaps a huge shift is required in U.S. foreign policy. So, but no, the Europeans can't do anything. For 3 years, we had the United States on our team, that is on team with Europe, trying everything to destroy the Russians. NATO, including the US, ran out of a lot of weapons. This is why Biden said they were sending cluster ammunition because they didn't have enough artillery shells. And now America's going to pull out of this, and Europe's going to carry the weight. No, you can't print these weapons. I think the EU is very good at standing in front of camera, doing group photos, saying, we stand here united, stand with Ukraine till the end. But there's nothing behind this. They can't print all this ammunition they need. They can't make a declaration that magically makes a huge Ukrainian army appear. It's over. NATO ran out of both weapons and Ukrainians, and now the war has been lost. And this is what the Europeans also don't understand. This is why Trump is pulling out. They see that the war is over. So either now you have a collapse and have a huge mess, or you try to save Ukraine by trying to push NATO into this conflict. There's no other way. Either you move towards World War III or you accept defeat. Trump is pushing for negotiations, and Europeans are resisting it. And as you see from these hopeless proposals, there's no alternative. They don't have any other alternative. They try all they can to come up with some proposal for an alternative peace. But again, there's a reason why the Europeans have been sitting on their hands for 3 years, refusing to sit down with the Russians. There is no other solution here. So I would love to hear a better solution, but I am not seeing one.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And I think that Trump laid that out pretty clearly on Friday when he had that meeting with Zelensky. And he literally said to Zelensky's face, look, you are losing this war. Russia is winning this war. We're trying to get some sort of a deal, to get some sort of a settlement so that you still have a country. And yet you are fighting this. And as we're seeing when it comes to the European allies, they're also fighting this. You had French President Emmanuel Macron labeling Russia as a threat and saying that France would consider protecting European allies with its nuclear arsenal, while continuing to claim that Russia wants to wage a global war. When you look at someone like Macron, I mean, he could, and I'm assuming this here, right? I'm assuming he could go the way of Trump and say, you know what? Trump is right. We've done what we can. We've gone after Russia here and there. I'm going to join him in pursuing peace. But he's doing the exact opposite of that. What do you make of that strategy on his point? Is there more to it than just kind of this stubbornness and refusing to let go on this Ukraine project that they've worked so hard on and spent so much money on over the last 3 years?
No, but I think there's some of them who wants to still suggest that they're relevant, that they all want to be included. Not only is the war coming to an end, which was lost, but once it lost, the United States doesn't want to just get out of Ukraine; they want to get out of Europe. And now that they're holding talks, the Europeans aren't even invited. And the Russians say there's no reason to have Europeans there. The Americans more or less agree. This is it's a catastrophe. So what can you do in this situation? I think they're just pounding their chest and trying to make themselves look bigger. And all this rhetoric, I think. It captured the Europeans because they all, clap each other on the shoulder saying, we're standing with Ukraine. But, this is also nonsense. We're not standing with Ukraine. A majority of Ukrainians want negotiations. They're willing to give up territory to get peace. If we continue this war, it's just going to lead to more deaths among the Ukrainians. There's going to be more loss of territory, and the country might be destroyed. If the Russians suspect that the Europeans will try to continue this war after a peace agreement, they will simply want to take all the territory which they can't afford to be used in the future as a front line against Russia. So it's just again, I saw this as a positive thing, a peace now. I agree with many of the Europeans that it's going to be a horrible peace. It's going to be humiliating for the Ukrainian. That is that, there's no NATO. They have to surrender territory. There's no security guarantees. This is terrible. But my assumption until now, until Trump came along, was that this war would be solved on the battlefield, exactly because Russia considers this to be an existential threat. So they have all these very huge demands, which seems very unfair for the Ukrainians, and the Europeans would never accept. Which meant that if there's not going to be a peace, what's Russia going to do? Well, it's going to snatch all territories which it can't afford being a NATO territory, so everything from Kharkov to Odessa, making Ukraine a landlocked country, and then wrecking the place. That is just destroying the country, everything of energy infrastructure, just make sure that it's a dysfunctional country, one which can never be used by NATO as a front against Russia. So I thought this is where we're going. Conflict being solved on the battlefield and the country being completely demolished. Now Trump is saying, we'll make a peace. We understand that NATO provoked this. Let's come. We'll find a middle way. And now the country can survive. They can actually have a coastline. They can keep much of the territory. Their men can stop dying. And what the Europeans are doing is saying, no, we will stand with you, until the last Ukrainian. It's just, it's very dark, and they're so convinced of their own virtue. It's just, it's extraordinary. Every time I look up in the newspaper, it just becomes more ridiculous by the day.
It really does. And, you make a really important point there when it comes to the fact that, look, there is kind of this possibility of what could be, right? And Trump, to a certain extent, is ushering that in, saying, look, we don't have to fight until the last Ukrainian. And yes, it may be humiliating for Ukraine and NATO if they make some sort of a deal with Russia that acknowledges the reality on the battlefield, which is the fact that Russia is winning this war and there's not much that NATO can do. When it comes to the Russian side, I'm very curious on that, because obviously it is a breath of fresh air, I'm sure, to the Russian government to hear some of the things that Trump and that members of his administration are saying right now. You've got Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, saying this is a proxy war between the US and Russia. You've got Trump acknowledging the reality on the ground, at least as much as he ever has at this point. So if you're in Russia's position and you're looking at all of this progress, you're looking at the tensions between the US and Kiev and the US and Brussels, but you're also remembering the Minsk Accords, remembering everything that we've gone through to get us to this point, and also remembering the fact that Trump is only going to be in office for 4 years. How do you look, or how do you think that Russia is looking at this current situation?
Well, I think they obviously see Trump as being more reasonable, more rational, but also I think they're still skeptical. As you said, they had many times of being betrayed. They saw them being betrayed in Istanbul. They were betrayed with Minsk. They were betrayed in 2014 when when the EU agreed to a unity government in Ukraine, but instead toppled it. The Americans and Russians had a reset, and at the same time, the Americans were plotting against them. You can go all the way back to after the Cold War, when we had an agreement, signed agreements to have a pan-European security architecture, and we threw that out the window so we can have a hegemonic security system with NATO. So they just see the past 35 years as being a long line of betrayal and backstabbing. And suddenly now you have this president coming along saying, well, we realize what we've done. We shouldn't have done this. Everyone knew, again, common sense, that expanding NATO to Ukraine was going to trigger a war. This was foolish. But still, why is he saying it? Because this is the same Trump who supplied the javelins in his first administration. So they also thinking, well, they're saying this for one reason, that they lost the war. If the war hadn't been lost, you wouldn't have this admission now. So it's, and also, as you pointed out very correctly, Trump is not going to be there forever. Again, he's a very unique character. I can't imagine any other person pulling this off. And so they're going to not want to build a peace based on trust, because there is no trust. And if there's no trust, then you want something hard, something you can rely on, and that means that they're going to be very, very reluctant. They're not going to give up any territory which they have, because if NATO wants to restart this conflict in 4 years' time, at least then Russia will have a lot of the strategic territory which it needs. Instead of falling in the hands of NATO. So it's this is a problem. In the absence of trust and reliable agreements, there's very little that can be done through in a peace agreement. So if you don't think it's going to last, so no, it's. But again, there's some optimism as well. Like I said, they can use 4 years now to really change relations with the US. And beyond losing the war, I think they also see something else, which is the Americans are recognizing that the entire international system has shifted. That is, Rubio pointed out that unipolarity is over. We have a multipolar system. One of the biggest economy then is not even a Western country, is China. The world is shifting a lot. So it's not going to go back to the way it was, no matter who comes into the White House. So there are opportunities now.
Yeah, and I think that that's important to kind of keep in mind, because it's easy to look at the current situation and think back to where we were in 2014. But as you pointed out, Russia has continued to grow, China has continued to grow, and so has the alliance between them, as well as these growing multipolar world that we're seeing all around. Now, I am curious too, when it comes back to Zelenskyy, because he said this week he did not apologize for his conduct during this meeting with Trump, right? He said it was regrettable. Basically, he wants to move on. Let's forget about that. Let's sign a minerals deal. But when it comes to some of the other statements that Zelenskyy has made, he specifically said it would be very hard to get me out of office, right? He's saying, you'd have to prevent me from running in the elections, assuming that he would win that election if it happened tomorrow. But on top of that, we also know that this is the guy who has banned all of the major opposition parties in Ukraine. He's nationalized the media. So to a certain extent, he's right. It would be hard to get him out of office, because it would be hard to have a free and fair election in Kiev. How do you view the position that Zelensky's in, and kind of how much longer he's going to be allowed to be in this position, kind of parading around? Yes, he has the affection of the European leaders right now, but does that last for much longer?
Well, they didn't just have his opposition removed. He arrested the main opposition leader, Medvedchuk. He even took away his citizenship and called him a Russian traitor and sent him out. I mean, this is it's as if Biden would have taken away the American citizenship of a Trump and expelled him and thrown him in jail. It's completely absurd. He did it to several MPs actually. So no, but I think what is people are often, I think, captured by all the drama, the screaming, the way they were talking to each other. But this is not just emotions without any substance. And if Zelensky wants to come back and make a, well, let's call it a peace with Trump, then it has to be recognize what the whole argument was about. And what the Americans want is they want this peace to go through. This is what they're pushing for. So what they're signaling to Zelensky as well is, if you're not going to sign this deal, I think Trump framed it something, then you're not going to be around very long, or he had an interesting statement. But anyways, this is the point. I think if he doesn't want to make a deal, they can put in someone else, because they can simply question his entire legitimacy. Again, his presidential term has expired. He couldn't win an election if there was a free election. If you consider what is done to the opposition, there's a lot of reason why they can strip him of his legitimacy. But beyond that, they're also now clearly communicated to the rest of the Ukrainian government. And I just read some reports that some of Trump's people are apparently talking to the other parts of the government, and they're very clearly saying the reason you're not getting any weapons from us, the reason why you're not getting intelligence from us, the reason why you now can't do anything on the battlefield is because you have Zelensky. We can't work with him. So in other words, if you wouldn't be there, then things would be different, wouldn't it? I mean, why would you want to keep Zelensky? So this is why I'm thinking, something dramatic could happen there fairly soon. And so this is the pressure, and the pressure will only mount from the United States. But at the end of the day, if the Europeans are successful in sabotaging this peace as well, after Istanbul, Minsk, all of this, then I think Trump's just going to wash his hands with it. Say, I did my best. You want the war? Go ahead, do what you want. We're not going to be part of this anymore. As Hegseth said, you can do whatever you want there. You're not having an American Article 5 security guarantee. So we're going, and I think this is the direction we might go. And then we might have problem, because the Europeans are very desperate, and they're saying a lot of silly things these days, and they could do some silly things as well. So we could have a greater war here in Europe.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to watch it play out too, because I'm going, okay, if you are a leader in Europe and you've watched for the last 3 years as, with the full backing of the US, you have not been able to quote unquote beat Russia in any possible category, what makes you think that you're going to be able to do it alone while the US is actively trying to pursue peace with Russia? I just do not understand it, but I am very curious to see how they decide to proceed, and when those cards, that being individual European leaders, start to kind of fall and say, okay, maybe it's enough, maybe we've gone too far. And if that happens before it's too late, certainly a lot at stake here. And I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today to break down all of the latest here. Glenn Diesson, a geopolitical analyst, author, and professor at the University of South-Eastern Norway. Thank you so much for your time and insight.
Oh, thanks again. I appreciate the time.
If anything in this video resonated with you, be sure to like it, share it with your friends, leave a comment, and as always, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to keep up with all of my work, make sure that you're subscribed to my page on Substack. That's rachelblevins.substack.com. That's where you'll find ad-free videos and new weekly episodes of my exclusive series for paid subscribers called Sanctioned. You can also find Sanctioned over on my page on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Rachel Blevins. As always, thank y'all so much for all of your support, and I'll see you next time.